Everyone knows Thor, Odin, and Loki. Marvel made them household names. But the Norse pantheon had dozens of gods, and most of them have been completely forgotten by modern culture. Today we're exploring Norse gods lost in time, powerful deities that ruled over specific domains, influenced Viking life profoundly, and reveal the true complexity of Norse mythology and religion. Norse mythology isn't just three gods and Ragnarok. It's an intricate web of deities governing fate, justice, poetry, agriculture, seafaring, and the mysterious forces that shape the harsh Scandinavian world. The gods you've never heard of were often more important to everyday Norse life than the famous ones. They were prayed to for survival, prosperity, and protection in a brutal environment. So why were these gods forgotten? Simple. When Norse mythology was preserved centuries after Christianization, writers focused on the dramatic stories, battles, betrayals, apocalyptic prophecies. The quieter gods without epic sagas got left out. But archaeological evidence and the few surviving texts reveal that these minor gods had widespread worship and deep significance. Today we're uncovering the Norse gods that time forgot. Gods of light and justice, gods of the sea and winds, gods of prosperity and peace. And what we'll discover is that Norse religion was far more nuanced, far more sophisticated, and far more philosophically deep than Marvel would have you believe. Let's start with Heimdall, who you might have seen in Marvel movies but don't really understand. Heimdall is one of the most mysterious and powerful gods in Norse mythology. Heimdall is the guardian of Bifrost, the rainbow bridge connecting Midgard, Earth, to Asgard, realm of the gods. He stands eternal watch, needing less sleep than a bird, able to see for hundreds of miles day or night, able to hear grass growing and wool growing on sheep. His senses are supernaturally acute because he must detect the approach of enemies, especially giants threatening Asgard. But here's what makes Heimdall truly fascinating: he's called the whitest of the gods, and is associated with light, dawn, and purity. Some scholars believe he represents the dawn itself, the first light that marks the boundary between night and day, just as he marks the boundary between human and divine realms. He's a liminal deity, existing at thresholds and transitions. Heimdall will blow the Ullr horn to signal the beginning of Ragnarok. His blast will be heard across all 9 realms, summoning gods to their final battle. In that battle, he and Loki will kill each other, 2 liminal boundary-crossing gods destroying one another at the end of time. Ancient Norse people invoked Heimdall when standing watch, when guarding their homes and borders, when needing vigilance and awareness. He represented the constant alertness required to survive in a dangerous world. But modern retellings reduce him to the gatekeeper, without exploring his deeper significance. Now let's talk about Baldr, who might be the most tragic figure in Norse mythology. Baldr is the son of Odin and Frigg, the most beautiful and beloved of all gods. He represents light, joy, purity, and peace. Everything about him is perfect: he's wise, eloquent, kind, and radiates goodness. But Baldr has prophetic dreams foretelling his own death. Frigg, his mother, travels through all 9 realms extracting oaths from every living thing never to harm Baldr. She gets promises from weapons, plants, animals, stones, metals, diseases, poisons, everything. Except mistletoe, which she thinks is too young and harmless to bother with. The gods, believing Baldr invulnerable, make a game of throwing things at him and watching them bounce off harmlessly. But Loki, ever the trickster, discovers the mistletoe loophole. He fashions a dart or spear from mistletoe and tricks Baldr's blind brother Hodr into throwing it. The mistletoe pierces Baldr, and he dies. The gods are devastated. They send Hermod to Hel, the underworld, to bargain for Baldr's return. Hel agrees: if every living thing weeps for Baldr, he can return. All creation weeps except one giantess, possibly Loki in disguise, who refuses. So Baldr remains in hell until after Ragnarok, when he returns to rule the new world. Baldr represents the inevitable loss of innocence and joy. His death marks the beginning of the end, the first domino falling toward Ragnarok. Norse people understood that even the most perfect, most beloved beings are vulnerable to fate and malice. Baldr's story teaches that loss is inevitable but not final. He will return after the world is destroyed and renewed. Ancient Norse people honored Baldr as a symbol of what could be, a world without suffering or violence. His death reminded them of the fragility of peace and the necessity of vigilance against those who would destroy it. Next is Tyr, the god of war, justice, and law. Most people have never heard of him, but he was one of the most important gods in early Norse religion. Tyr is one-handed because he sacrificed his right hand to bind Fenrir, the monstrous wolf. The gods needed to restrain Fenrir but knew he wouldn't submit willingly. They tricked him into being bound with a magical ribbon called Gleipnir, but Fenrir demanded a god place their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Only Tyr had the courage and honor to do it. When Fenrir realized he'd been tricked, he bit off Tyr's hand. This sacrifice defines Tyr. He represents the willingness to endure personal loss for the greater good. He embodies lawful order, the social contract, the idea that individuals must sometimes sacrifice for society's benefit. His missing hand is a constant reminder that justice requires sacrifice. Tyr was worshipped as the god of the thing, the Norse assembly where disputes were resolved and laws debated. Warriors invoked him not just for battlefield victory but for justice in combat, for honorable warfare governed by rules. He represents civilization's triumph over chaos through law and order. At Ragnarok, Tyr will fight and be killed by Garm, the hound guarding hell. Two guardians, two beings who sacrifice themselves for duty, will destroy each other at the end. Tyr's death symbolizes that even law and order eventually fall to chaos, but his sacrifice ensures the new world will remember his principles. Ancient Norse people saw Tyr as a foundational deity. Tuesday, Tyr's Day, is named after him. He represents the Norse ideal, courageous self-sacrifice for communal benefit, rule of law over might makes right. But modern retellings focus on Thor and Odin, ignoring Tyr's profound significance. Then there's Vidar, the silent god of vengeance and rebirth. Vidar is Odin's son, incredibly strong but rarely speaks. He's called the silent god, dwelling alone in a thick forest called Vidi. Vidar's defining moment comes at Ragnarok. When Fenrir kills Odin, Vidar steps forward and tears Fenrir's jaw apart with his bare hands, avenging his father's death. He survives Ragnarok, one of the few gods to endure the apocalypse, and helps build the new world. Vidar represents patience, strength held in reserve, the idea that silence can be more powerful than speech. While other gods boast and scheme, Vidar waits. While others die in the apocalypse, Vidar survives. He embodies endurance, the capacity to outlast catastrophe. Ancient Norse people invoked Vidar when they needed patience, when they needed to endure hardship, when they needed strength to rebuild after disaster. He represents the Norse understanding that survival often requires quiet determination rather than flashy heroics. Now let's explore Forseti, the god of justice, mediation, and reconciliation. Forseti is Baldr's son, and like his father, he represents harmony and peace. Forseti presides over Gleipnir, a hall with silver roof and golden pillars where gods and humans come to settle disputes. He's renowned for his ability to mediate conflicts, find compromises, and deliver just verdicts that all parties accept. He represents restorative rather than punitive justice, the idea that resolution is better than revenge. Ancient Norse thing assemblies invoked Forseti when deliberating difficult cases. He represented the ideal of justice achieved through wisdom and persuasion rather than force. Viking Age Frisians particularly venerated him, believing he guided their legal assemblies. Forseti represents a sophisticated Norse understanding of justice. Not just punishment of wrongdoing but restoration of social harmony. He embodies the principle that communities function best when conflicts are resolved fairly rather than through violence or tyranny. Next is Ullr, the god of skiing, hunting, archery, and winter survival. Ullr is one of the most ancient Norse gods, possibly predating even Odin in Germanic religion. Ullr is described as incredibly handsome, a master archer, an expert skier, and a warrior of unmatched skill. In some traditions, he temporarily rules Asgard when Odin goes into exile. His name means glory or brilliance, suggesting his importance in early Norse culture. Ancient Scandinavians invoked Ullr before winter hunts, before skiing expeditions, before archery competitions. He represented the skills necessary for survival in harsh northern climates. Skiing wasn't recreation, it was essential transportation and hunting technique. Ullr governed life-or-death wilderness skills. Archaeological evidence shows widespread Ullr worship across Scandinavia. Place names preserve his memory: Ullevi, Ullraker, Ullensaker. But because he doesn't appear in the main mythological narratives, modern culture has completely forgotten him. Yet he was arguably more important to everyday Norse life than Thor or Odin. Then there's Bragi, the god of poetry, eloquence, and skaldic arts. Bragi is Odin's son, in some accounts, and the husband of Idun, keeper of the golden apples of youth. Bragi welcomes slain warriors to Valhalla with poems and songs. He's renowned for his wisdom and eloquence, able to compose verses that move gods to tears or laughter. He represents the Norse reverence for poets and storytellers, the belief that words wield power equal to weapons. In Viking culture, skalds, poets, held high status because they preserved history, honored heroes, and shaped reputation. A warrior's deeds meant nothing without a skald to sing of them. Bragi personified this cultural value, the divine patron of those who wield words as weapons. Ancient Norse people invoked Bragi when composing verses, when reciting at feasts, when needing eloquence in debates. Bragging originally meant invoking Bragi's gift of compelling speech. He represents the Norse understanding that civilization depends on preserving and transmitting knowledge through skilled storytelling. Now let's discuss Njord, the god of the sea, wind, fishing, and prosperity. Njord is a Vanir god, the older nature deities, who came to live with the Aesir as part of the peace treaty between the two divine races. Njord governs seas and winds, crucial for a seafaring culture like the Norse. Fishermen, sailors, and traders invoked him for safe voyages and profitable catches. His Hall Noten, ship enclosure, sits by the shore, and he's associated with calm seas and favorable winds. Njord married Skadi, goddess of mountains and winter, but their marriage failed because he loved the sea and she loved the mountains. They couldn't agree on where to live. His hall was too noisy with seabirds for her, her mountains too far from the ocean for him. This myth reflects Norse understanding of incompatibility, that even gods cannot force harmony when fundamental natures conflict. Ancient Norse coastal communities built altars to Njord, made offerings before voyages, and thanked him for safe returns. He represented the possibility of prosperity through cooperation with natural forces rather than domination of them. Then there's Skadi, goddess of mountains, skiing, hunting, and winter. Skadi is a giantess who becomes a goddess, which makes her unique in the Norse pantheon. When the gods kill her father Thiazi, Skadi arrives in Asgard fully armed, demanding compensation. The gods offer her a husband chosen by looking only at feet, she chooses Njord thinking he's Baldr. They also promise to make her laugh, which Loki accomplishes through crude humor. She receives her compensation and becomes part of the Aesir. Skadi represents the mountains, wilderness, harsh winter, and the hunt. She skis through mountains with bow and arrows, hunting alone in frozen landscapes. She embodies self-sufficiency, the ability to thrive in conditions that would kill softer beings. Ancient Norse people, especially those in mountainous regions, invoked Skadi for winter survival, for successful hunts, for strength to endure harsh conditions. She represents the feminine warrior, the woman who needs no one, the goddess who demands respect and compensation for wrongs. Now let's explore Freya, who you might know but probably don't truly understand. Freya is the goddess of love, beauty, fertility, war, death, and magic. Yes, all of those. She's far more complex than modern depictions suggest. Freya practices Seidr, a form of Norse magic associated with fate-weaving and prophecy. She taught Seidr to Odin, making her his magical superior in this domain. Seidr was considered somewhat shameful for men but powerful and acceptable for women, reflecting Norse gender dynamics. But here's what's really interesting, Freya gets first choice of slain warriors. Half go to her hall Folkvangr, half to Odin's Valhalla. This makes her equal to Odin in death governance. She's a war goddess, not just a love goddess. She rides into battle, chooses the slain, rules over a afterlife hall. Freya also owns the necklace Brisingamen, which she obtained through sexual favors to 4 dwarves. She rides a chariot pulled by cats. She possesses a cloak of falcon feathers allowing her to fly. She weeps tears of red gold when her husband Odin disappears. Ancient Norse women invoked Freya for love, fertility, and childbirth. But warriors also invoked her, especially women warriors. She represents the Norse understanding that femininity encompasses both nurture and violence, love and war, beauty and death. Then there's Freyr, Freya's brother, god of prosperity, sunshine, fair weather, and peace. Freyr is a Vanir god associated with fertility, abundance, and good harvests. Freyr owns magical possessions, a sword that fights by itself, a ship called Skidbladnir that always has favorable wind and can be folded to fit in a pocket, and a golden boar Gullinbursti whose mane glows to light the way through darkness. But Freyr's defining myth is tragic. He falls in love with the giantess Njord and sends his servant to woo her. She refuses until threatened with curses. Freyr gives away his self-fighting sword as payment for winning Njord. At Ragnarok, without his sword, Freyr is killed by the fire giant Surtur. This myth teaches that love requires sacrifice but excessive sacrifice leaves you defenseless. Freyr represents the Norse ideal of generous kingship but also warns against giving away what you need for survival. His death at Ragnarok symbolizes that even peace and prosperity eventually fall to violence. Ancient Norse farmers invoked Freyr for good harvests, for mild winters, for prosperity. Swedish kings claimed descent from Freyr. His worship was widespread, yet modern culture barely remembers him. Now let's discuss Idun, keeper of the golden apples that grant the gods immortality. Idun is absolutely essential to Asgard's survival, yet most people have never heard of her. The gods are not naturally immortal. They rely on Idun's apples to maintain youth and vitality. When Loki tricks Idun into leaving Asgard and she's kidnapped by the giant Thiazi, the gods begin aging rapidly. They grow old, weak, near death. Only when Loki rescues Idun and brings her and her apples back do the gods regain their youth. This myth reveals something profound: even gods are mortal without proper sustenance. Divine immortality is conditional, maintained through Idun's magic. She represents the fragility of youth, the necessity of renewal, the idea that immortality is not inherent but must be actively maintained. Ancient Norse people understood aging as inevitable but also sought ways to delay or manage it. Idun represented the elusive dream of maintaining vitality, the understanding that youth is precious and temporary. Next is Hod, Baldr's blind brother who unknowingly kills him with the mistletoe dart. Hod is tragic because he's innocent, he's manipulated by Loki and doesn't realize he's delivering a fatal blow. After Baldr's death, the gods are torn between grief and anger at Hod. Some accounts say Odin fathers another son, Vali, specifically to avenge Baldr by killing Hod. Other accounts suggest Hod survives to Ragnarok and returns with Baldr afterward to rule the new world together, finally reconciled. Hod represents the innocent instrument of tragedy. He embodies how good people can be manipulated into causing harm, how disability doesn't exempt one from being used by evil, how ignorance doesn't prevent culpability. His story warns against blindly trusting others and emphasizes the importance of wisdom over innocence. Then there's Hermod, the messenger god and Odin's son. Hermod is brave and swift, often sent by the gods on dangerous missions. Hermod's most famous journey is to Hel to bargain for Baldr's return. He rides Odin's 8-legged horse Sleipnir for 9 days through dark valleys until reaching the gates of Hel. He leaps the gate, enters Hel's hall, and pleads for Baldr's release. He succeeds in negotiating terms but ultimately fails when one being refuses to weep. Hermod represents diplomatic courage. Not battlefield bravery but the courage to enter hostile territory as an emissary, to negotiate with enemies, to carry messages between warring parties. He embodies the necessity of communication even in conflict. Ancient Norse people invoked Hermod when undertaking diplomatic missions, when carrying important messages, when needing speed and courage combined. He represents civilization's alternative to pure violence, the possibility of resolution through brave communication. Now let's explore Sif, Thor's wife, known for her golden hair. Most people think she's just Thor's wife, but she has deeper significance. Loki once cut off Sif's hair while she slept, prompting Thor to threaten his life. Loki makes amends by having dwarves forge new hair from actual gold that grows like real hair. But why is golden hair significant? Scholars believe Sif represents the harvest. Golden hair equals golden grain. Her hair being cut represents failed harvest, sterility, famine. Thor's rage represents the need to restore fertility. The golden hair forged by dwarves represents prosperity restored through craft and magic. Sif likely had widespread worship as a harvest and fertility goddess, but little of her mythology survived. What remains suggests she was far more important than modern retellings acknowledge. Finally, let's discuss Vali, Odin's son born specifically to avenge Baldr's death. Vali is only 1 day old when he kills Hod, demonstrating supernatural rapid growth and purpose-driven existence. Vali represents vengeance as cosmic necessity. He exists for a single purpose, fulfills it immediately, and survives Ragnarok to help build the new world. He embodies the idea that some beings exist specifically to restore balance, that justice sometimes requires creating an avenger, that purpose gives life meaning even if that purpose is violent. Ancient Norse people understood that blood feuds required resolution. Families had obligations to avenge slain relatives. Vali mythologically represents this social necessity, the idea that some deaths demand answering death. So what have we learned? The Norse pantheon was incredibly rich and complex. Beyond Thor, Odin, and Loki, there were gods governing light and darkness, justice and vengeance, peace and war, sea and mountain, harvest and winter. Heimdall, Baldr, Tyr, Vidar, Forseti, Ullr, Bragi, Njord, Skadi, Freya, Freyr, Idun, Hod, Hermod, Sif, Valley, each reveals Norse values, fears, and wisdom. The Norse weren't simple warriors obsessed with violence. They valued justice, eloquence, survival skills, agriculture, seafaring, diplomacy, and renewal. Their gods reflected the complexity of life in harsh northern climates where cooperation, skill, and wisdom were as necessary as strength. Modern simplified versions miss this depth. We reduce Norse mythology to hammer-wielding warriors and apocalyptic battles. But the Norse were doing sophisticated philosophy through mythology, encoding survival wisdom, teaching social values, grappling with fate and mortality. What do you think? Do these forgotten Norse gods change how you understand Viking culture and religion? Which god surprised you most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring forgotten mythology across cultures, subscribe to Forbidden Knowledge. Tomorrow we're diving into Mesopotamian gods that shaped civilization, deities that invented writing, law, and urban society. This is going to be fascinating. Thanks for watching.